Hi friends, welcome back. It has been a little while since I've posted a process video, and that is because I have not been in my art journal as much. I've not been playing with paint and mixed media, but rather I have been making other things. I've been making art journals, snippet rolls, pouches, all those good things. So I've still been creating, it's just been a little bit different kind of creating. So to get back into it, I am doing some grid journaling. Now, I took this free mini course from Color Crush Creative, and that is a course that Kelly offers for free. I will tag the information down in the description below. So definitely go check that out, especially if you are in a little bit of a creative slump, or maybe you're just feeling a little bit intimidated by your art journal lately. So she shows you how to divide up your page into a grid. So right now I am using 2.5-inch squares to do this project. For me, I cut a few templates out of thin cardboard, and that is what I use to trace my squares, but just find something to trace around. It could be a little sticky notepad, it could be a lid, and you could do circle grid. You can do many different things, but since I was doing so many pages, I did decide to cut out, a template or a stencil of sorts to be able to make my grids faster. So I started out with my paintbrush and switched to a catalyst tool there for a little bit. I was using Liquitex Green Gray, and now I am switching over to Titan Green Pale from Golden Acrylics, and it is a heavy body. As always, I'm going to tag all my supplies down in the description below. And if I forget something, if I miss something, just go ahead and comment, and I will try to find that link for you. So my goal going into this video was to try out a couple different techniques. Mainly get out of what I normally do and just try something different. I was okay if things weren't going to work out or if it wasn't going to be perfect, but I just wanted to keep trying different methods. So I started with that paintbrush, which is a pretty typical method for me to apply paint. Then I switched to that catalyst tool, which I really like. That rubber silicone to apply paint. You could also use a spatula. And now I am using a hotel key card to scrape on that color. And I have two different colors of paint going. They're both in the same color family. But at this point, I'm wanting to see how they play together. Now, the paint from before is not completely dry, so that mixes some. But in other spots, I'm just applying a really light layer. I don't want to take too much time to dry in between the different processes that I'm doing. And so by applying light layers and switching between different squares, you can move pretty quickly. So I'm seeing how those colors play together, whether they mix or whether I get some transparent effects from that. I'm going back in with both of those colors and just seeing how they play. I really don't have a plan of how I want these to look in the end. I don't even have a plan of what supply I'm going to use next. So now to get more of that color on those squares, I'm going to use my fingers. Again, just trying out different techniques, seeing what works, and seeing what I like and what I don't like. I need to start putting in some contrast on these pages. So I'm coming in with my black gesso. I love how opaque this gesso is, but I'm being careful here on this page. I don't want to use too much because it is so opaque. I don't want it to completely overpower what I'm doing. I do want that background that I've already created to stick out in some different areas. So I'm just being careful with how much of that gesso I am using. I love the gesso that is in the jar. This brand happens to be Golden Acrylics. I love Golden products, but I've also noticed that the Liquitex black gesso works just as well. It's just as opaque, and I think dries about the same time. I do have both, and the reason for that is my Golden black gesso is in a jar and my Liquitex is in a squeeze bottle. I find different uses for both of those. When I am just applying a little bit with either paintbrush or my finger, I tend to use the jar, and then I have that lid to use almost as a palette. But if I'm gessoing a whole page, I prefer a squeeze bottle. I'm trying to switch up the marks that I do. As you can see, I've done circles several times, just some randomness, and I really want to just get myself loose, playing, and not thinking so much. I'm noticing that the more that I'm creating lately, the easier it is for me to get back into things. But in order to do that, I think I just need to let loose and play. This is a little spoolie that I'm using, a little makeup mascara wand here, and just playing with how that mark will look on the page. I'm holding it in different ways. I'm changing whether I'm tightly holding on to the end or just loosely. I hardly have any paint on the brush right now, but rather just kind of wiping it off, seeing what kind of marks it makes, and playing around. Next up, I need to add some scribbles to these little blocks. I think this just really grunges it up, gives it an organic feel, and the biggest part of why I do scribbles when I'm art journaling is it loosens me up. It helps me not feel as intimidated with the page in front of me, and remind myself not to take things too seriously. Now the black that I've added already with the gesso is a bit overpowering, but I want to add some more grunge in. Now the gesso adds some grunge, but it doesn't have different transparency levels, I guess. So now I'm adding in a Stabilo all pencil. I'm dipping that directly in a water cup and really just being random. So again, I don't want to add too much because I've already gotten black, but I do want to add some of that transparent grunge into the background. As you can see, I grabbed quite a big brush there, and that's normally not what I would do, but I'm trying to switch things up, seeing if it works. Now, I did not like how it worked, and that's okay. We can adapt and move on. So I went down in size slightly for the brush, and I'm liking this size a lot better. So I don't want any real defined marks from the Stabilo pencil. Rather, I want to just add some of that black grunge into the background. Stabilo all is one of my favorite ways to add grunge. Because you can really manipulate it, and you can just take the pigment from the pencil if you want, or you can mark directly on the page. Since I did add water in, I am going to hit that with the heat gun just a little bit, dry up the page, cut that out for you guys so you don't have to struggle along with me. Next up, I want to add in some white. So I grabbed another random supply. I grabbed a little kebab skewer, and I'm dipping directly into my white gesso jar, just getting some of that on the ends and playing around with how I can use the skewer to apply that white paint. This is not a tool that I typically use this way, and so it's good just to be able to use these grids as a way to experiment with a new tool, with a new supply, without really committing to a bigger project. Because this skewer does not hold paint like a paintbrush does, I'm playing around with how much paint I actually put on the skewer at one time. I'm testing out different ways of holding the skewer. I'm holding it loose at the end, or going a little bit tighter and rolling it on its edge. I'm not letting any preconceived ideas of how it should respond affect how I'm going to play with it today. I just want to keep trying different things. This kind of play for me is really important to be able to get back in the spirit of art journaling. I think it's so easy to get stuck. So if we look at a blank journal spread and we think that we have to know how things are going to look at the very end of the spread, and I think that can really stop us from creating. It can be very intimidating if we think that we have to know what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. Rather, if we just take it step by step, little bit by little bit, and just see how it works out. As you can see, I added quite a bit of that white paint with the skewer in that bottom row. I did not like the way that it looked, so I took a wet wipe and rubbed some of that away. Now that really just gave me a smeared look, and I didn't like that either. I didn't have a rag nearby, so I just grabbed a piece of paper and soaked up some of that extra moisture. And I like the way that it looks better now. So I think that's a good lesson in not always knowing what you're doing. And it's okay if you don't like everything that you do. We're not perfect. I know for sure everything I make, I am not a huge fan of. But I can usually get things to a point that I'm happy with them. And I think it's just a matter of keep working with it, keep experimenting, and continue to try different things. This page is turning out a little bit grungier than my normal style, a little bit scratchier, I think, just with some of the tools that I've used. And I think that's pretty fun to experiment with different styles. Now I'm using some backing of some drywall tape, the part that did not have adhesive on it. I was going to use matte medium to apply this because it did have a little bit of a shine. I wasn't sure if I wanted that, but I did not end up using matte medium just because I had used Stabilo all in on this page before. So if I would have used matte medium, there was a good chance that the pigment that was down on the page would have smeared around, and I didn't want that. So I decided just to use a glue stick, apply it directly to the paper instead of onto the piece that I'm gluing down. I put it directly on the paper, then put the piece on top of it. There's no right or wrong way to adhere things to your page. For me, I knew if I would have put the glue on the piece that I'm putting down, all those little holes, the glue would have gone all through them, and it just would have looked messy in the end. I think with this grid journaling, when you're adding new elements, you don't necessarily want to do the same thing in every square. You don't need to add a certain color in every square. For me, I like to view these two pages as a whole project, just cut up into mini parts. So that means that the color doesn't have to be in each one, but if we can place it uniquely throughout the pages, I think the whole spread then looks cohesive in the end. I'm using some vintage tape now. It is from Unwow Studios, and it is made to actually look like tape that has been aged. It's a really fun supply to use, and I find that it really ends up taking on the colors and the textures of whatever you're working with. So I think it is very versatile of a supply. I'm trying to be random with my placements. Again, not putting pieces in the same spot on every block. And this step is more subtle than the others, but I like to switch things up. Not every step that we do can be bold and take center stage. If we did that, I think things would end up looking a bit chaotic, which this page does look a bit chaotic, but I'm liking it so far. But if we can add in different steps that are more subtle versus have a more dramatic impact, I think in the end, the whole thing can be a bit more cohesive. I'm taking a moment between steps to just decide what I want to do next. As I said before, sometimes the next step comes easy, but I'm trying not to have everything planned out from the very beginning. I'm leaving room for experimentation. I'm leaving room for the page to really speak to me and tell me what it wants next. I don't like to have like a set of steps that I have in mind from the very beginning, and then I just repeat that on every page that I do. I think if we do that, we tend to get more in a rut, and we can feel less of that creative spark. Rather, if we can just start and then see where the page takes us, I think that's when we really grow and we learn. I'm using my bold black pen. It's one of my favorite black pens. It's a food ball pen. It's waterproof. And just adding in a few little art marks here just to accentuate what I've already done. I think it ties in the black that I've already done on the page. When it comes to art marks, I have a tendency to always use the same marks. It's not on purpose. It just is kind of what comes naturally to me. I do a lot of dots or pluses or little X's, and I think that's okay. I do try to switch it up, but sometimes I just get stuck and go back to the same thing. I'd rather keep working and keep doing the same thing versus not create at all because I'm frustrated I can't come up with anything else. I'm bringing in my Posca marker. It's a bit bolder than the pen that I was using, and just going to accentuate some of the marks that I've already done. I'm using some of those repetitive shapes in other parts of the spread just to tie things all together. And again, when you do a grid journal spread, you don't have to have it, look completely cohesive as an entire 2 pages. Each individual block can be its own artwork, which I think is really beautiful. And Kelly even talks about in the mini course of taking these individual blocks and putting them into a larger painting or a larger piece of work. So really taking these little blocks as a source of inspiration for the future. I have not done any yet where I've taken a block as inspiration and brought it into something bigger. I don't have very much experience with larger paintings or larger mixed media works. That's something I would like to do in the future, but it's just not something that I've had time for yet. Continuing with just a few more art marks here. It can be hard to know when to stop, and I think art marks can get a bit out of hand. So I have to try to tell myself not to do too many. But, if you're having fun, just go for it. I hope that you guys have loved watching along so far. If you've liked this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and if you want to see more from me, make sure to join my email list. They are the first ones to know about new items that hit the shop, new blog posts, new videos, all of that good stuff. It's a free list to sign up for, and I often try to send out freebies and different digital downloads. All right, I hope that you guys enjoyed watching, and I will see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.